ill-prepared businesses going into Cyber Week expecting to make money. That's a discounting month. Discounting months are typically not big money makers. And then the double whammy is you're likely to see the drop-off in sales in December, because what happens is that customers have a finite amount of money in their wallet. It doesn't all of a sudden put more money in their wallet because it's Cyber Week. They have the same amount of money. That money goes in November. Doesn't get all of a sudden magically topped up in December. The money's gone. You should be leaning on the strength of your CRM, leaning on your email list, your SMS list, and so on. Welcome to episode 9 of the eHustle. I'm Paul Waddy. Today, I'm going to talk about how to lose money this Cyber Week. Yeah, you heard it right. We're going to talk about how to lose money. Now, I say this a little bit facetiously because I want people to make lots and lots of cash. Notice I said cash, not lots and lots of sales. But the reality is I've made this mistake before, and I've seen a lot of brands make it where they load up for this enormous Cyber Week, buy a ton of stock, and then when their numbers roll through, the bottom line looks worse than October. The accountants submit the financials and the brands are like, this can't be right. So I want to talk about how to avoid those issues today. Yeah, look, I do have a growing dislike for Cyber Week. I've been in retail a long time before we had Cyber Week. Now, who makes money out of Cyber Week? I don't know, the banks, the merchant fees, the couriers, the freight companies. Their margins all stay the same. It's at the expense of the retailers. And so my growing dislike for it is based on the growing number of businesses that I've seen start to fail on the back of it. It's not because I woke up one day and didn't like Black Friday, but I've just seen so many businesses start the new year on the back of, terrible decisions over Cyber Week, getting into debt by buying too much stock, then discounting it and not being profitable, having such a low profit. I just think the sales that you've got to make are astronomical to generate decent cash. And I think you pay for those sales in December. Largely speaking, my dislike for Black Friday is growing on the back of businesses who are scaling up their paid media spend while scaling down their gross profits through discounting, resulting in really average net profits and actually cash flow problems. And what you start to see is customers being trained to wait for those periods, which makes, disproportionately low sales the rest of the year and disproportionately high sales in November. Over the course of the year, does it do more good or bad? Not really sure. It's really about getting that strategy right and protecting your brand, but also protecting your business. A lot of business owners see Cyber Week as a time to rake in huge profits. It sometimes pans out that way. It sometimes doesn't. I think it's glamorized because people go around posting their screenshots of huge sales. Well, guess what? If I've overbought on inventory and I crank my marketing spend up to 30%, I can show you pretty big sales easily. There's no skill in that whatsoever. I'd love to see people posting their bank accounts. And what you often see is that a lot of these businesses are just pumping up their sales, for that one time. There's no skill in that, running an enormous amount of ads while discounting. Really, the goal is full price sales consistently throughout the year. So I'm more excited when I see a business do well in its worst month than a business do well on paper through discounting, ramping up paid media spend, unnecessary pressure on bank account, taking finance to buy too much stock to sell at a discounted rate. That cycle doesn't fit well with me. So I'll run through a quick example of how a brand that's discounting can actually make less profit in a high sales, high discounting period like Cyber Week. They can make less profit than a normal month like October. So I'll run you through that scenario. So let's take this dummy business that makes $300K in a normal month, say October, at full price sales. And then Cyber Week comes and they make an additional $100K. So they make $400K, but they're discounting by 25%. So in the normal month, October, they make that $300K with a 70% margin. So 30% cost of goods sold, or COGS. Okay, so we've got a gross profit of 43%. OPEX stays at 40. Why would OPEX stay at 40%? A lot of people would say, wouldn't those fixed costs scale away? What fixed costs? Your biggest operating expenses in e-commerce are variable: marketing and wages. You need more wages to keep up with the customer service tickets, to keep up with picking and packing the orders. And a lot of brands will just scale up their marketing or at least keep it the same. So what are we scaling away? Our rent, our subscriptions? Realistically, the operating expenses often will stay the same. Some people actually scale their marketing up. So let's say this business keeps their marketing spend, keeps all of that, and their OPEX is 40%. They've made 3%. 3% on 400,000 is 12,000. So higher sales by 100,000 for this small business. That's amazing. But their bottom line shows a smaller net profit than full price October. Now, I'm not making that scenario up. I see that scenario all the time. And it comes through a lack of understanding about the numbers and a lack of discounting appropriately. Discounting in Cyber Week's fine, appropriately and with a strategy that drives a lot of cash. That business there has generated tiny profit, but even worse, that's probably loaded up on inventory. They may have borrowed at high interest rates to buy that inventory. They may have overbought, expecting 500,000. So they're stuck with the inventory. There's a good chance that business has actually made no free cash in the month of November. That's a wake-up call for businesses. Many businesses are not aware of this leading into Cyber Week. Again, that's not a guess. I see heaps of businesses. I get approached all the time after Cyber Week because it just hasn't gone to plan. So I think it's just a lack of awareness about the numbers, really understanding what is your gross profit margin going to be in November. That's a question for brands listening. What's your gross profit margin going to be? Okay, now subtract your operating expenses from that. Is the number that you're left with appropriate? So I think it's just simply ill-prepared businesses going into Cyber Week expecting to make money. That's a discounting month. Discounting months are typically not big money makers. And then the double whammy is you're likely to see the drop-off in sales in December, because what happens is that customers have a finite amount of money in their wallet. It doesn't all of a sudden put more money in their wallet because it's Cyber Week. They have the same amount of money. For your brand, they have the same amount of money to spend. That money goes in November. Doesn't get all of a sudden magically topped up in December. The money's gone. Call me boring, but I like good, consistent businesses that maybe clear some inventory in Cyber Week, have a good month, but they're not giving the game away. They're not selling their soul in November. So there's a couple of things that brands can do to avoid some of these pitfalls in Cyber Week. So one tip is to decrease your marketing spend to accommodate for your worst COGS. So if your COGS are usually 30%, but you're going to discount, and so they're going to go to 35% in Cyber Week, then take 5% off your marketing spend so that your net profit is untouched at the end of the month. That's my go-to. I do that all the time. And it works. And you sort of say, well, why would I decrease my marketing spend? You're not decreasing it. Your sales are going up, so, considerably. So your actual dollar value is likely to go up even if you take 5% off it. But the other thing to ask yourself is, if you're a strong brand, and hopefully we all want to build strong brands, and you're discounting 20, 25, 30% off, should you really have to spend the same amount on marketing? And if you do, is there a problem there? You should be leaning on the strength of your CRM, leaning on your email list, your SMS list, and so on. But good brands, at the best of times, don't need to spend a fortune on paid media. When they're discounting, surely you can pull it back even further just to protect that bottom line. Yeah, businesses need to think less about Cyber Week and more about the sustainability and longevity of their business over 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Cyber Week's a blip on the radar. If you're really getting excited about Cyber Week, that doesn't excite me at all. Again, I'd much rather see how a business goes in January than in November, because it's easy to make sales in November. Cash is the key metric here. Remember that your bank account, not me, your bank account will tell you whether your strategy is working or not. And the same goes for Cyber Week. You'll be flush with cash for a week or so, but are you paying back loans because you bought the inventory? How does December look? How does January look? So I think, what would happen to your business if Cyber Week suddenly ended? And by the way, there's a lot of smart business owners who are pushing for brands not to partake in Cyber Week because discounting damages brands. If you're a discounting brand, I'm not talking to you now, that's great. You're a price leader. But the vast majority of people listening to this are going to spend 11 months of the year telling us how luxe their brand is, how special it is, how great quality it is. And then we're going to pivot to saying how cheap it is. We're 20% off, we're 30% off. That's a juxtaposition. That doesn't work. You can't go 90% of the year telling people how great the brand and the product is and trying to persuade them to part with money at top dollar. And then we say 30% off, 25%. Customers aren't silly. We understand that. That's mixed messaging. Again, if you're a price leader, if you're a discounter, if you're Coles, everyday low prices, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the brands who say that their unique value propositions are based on quality and, style and all these beautiful things, but then start really pivoting towards being a discounter to drive sales in November. It's just kind of juxtaposition. It's a clashing strategy. It's not sustainable. If you have to discount grade C product. It's not making you any money anyway. This Cyber Week, key focus for businesses listening to this is build cash. Sales, we're not interested in sales. Any mug can make sales. We want profitability on par as a percentage with a normal month, and we want to be banking big profits. It is impossible that we bank big profits if we just scale everything up, scale our spend up, scale our costs up, scale our orders up. We need to just be bringing some of those costs, namely marketing, down to allow for a bit of discounting. Don't give your COGS away. If your COGS are dropping by 10%, you're discounting too heavily. Focus on grade C product, protect grade A product because it sells anyway. And remember, cash is king or queen. Sales don't mean anything.